Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Gritty Hour. I'm here with a special guest today, Sofie Devens, who's a local resident in my general area. And she recently went on a trip to Papua New Guinea, which I found fascinating that someone went there. You don't get to talk about Papua New Guinea all that often in the northeast part of the United States of America. So, welcome to The Gritty Hour, Sofie.
Thank you. Thank you
Did
for
you?
having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. Did you have a good time on the trip?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about it. Where did you leave from? Here in Newark?
Yeah, so I started in Newark.
Mhm.
I went with my sister and a friend of mine, her mom. So we started in Newark and flew to Los Angeles, and then from Los Angeles to Brisbane, Australia, and then from Brisbane to Mount Hagen, and then from
Now,
Mount Hagen.
Mahogany is where?
It is in Papua New Guinea. It's the capital of Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
And then from there, or I'm sorry, not Mount Hagen. We flew to Port Moresby.
Yeah, isn't that the capital, Port Moresby?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then from Port Moresby to Mount Hagen, because Mount
I got
Hagen
you.
is the highlands.
Okay. For those listening, if you're hearing a little echo, to give you full disclosure, Sofie is not sitting too far away from me, so that's why on a different computer. But that's why there's an echo. So tell us about how was the actual trip? Isn't it like 20 something hours to get there?
Yeah. So the first flight is like 6 hours. The second flight was 15. The third was about like 3.5 hours. And then the fourth is an hour and a half. But on our way there, the fourth flight ended up getting delayed a couple times. And then due to weather, and also a combination of like weather and like how late it got, they ended up canceling our last flight.
Oh, geez.
So we ended up having to stay in Port Moresby for the night, which was not expected. And we don't really, none of us, like, obviously none of us have been to Papua New Guinea before. And Papua New Guinea doesn't, the country itself, its native language is not English. So
What is the native language?
it's called Talk Pigeon,
Okay.
which the locals said that it's like a trade language. So it was kind of created by a mixture of like a bunch of different languages when they were trading with surrounding countries.
Okay.
So we definitely had like a language barrier there. And then the country is really kind of like more male dominated. So 3 women traveling within the country alone is not necessarily the most safe thing.
Highly suspect, if you ask me.
Yes. So we ended up going to like customer service because they said that they would like get us on a new flight for tomorrow, for the next day, and comp a stay for us in the hotel. But we ended up waiting for 8 hours in the airport. And we didn't really get anywhere, and everyone was just kind of like crowded around the customer service desk, which I think we have a photo of it.
Yeah, actually, you were
Photo.
gracious enough to send me a few pictures. The one I'm using, people aren't used to seeing me in front of 2 huts, but is this one of the huts you stayed in? My background here?
No,
No.
thankfully we had plumbing and running water in
Oh,
where we stayed,
okay.
but the houses behind you are where the locals live.
I see.
Yeah, but so anyway, so we're stuck in Port Moresby for the night. We end up just taking it upon ourselves and getting a hotel ourselves because they're taking forever, and there's no sense of urgency. Like, we live in New York, and you got to get stuff done, you got to get where you're going, and everybody's kind of in a fast pace.
Uh-huh.
Nothing seems to be on time in Papua New Guinea. They consider it island time.
So they'll do it when they get to it.
Right. Yeah. There's no sense of urgency whatsoever.
It's not a bad way of living, but yeah.
It's a little bit stressful.
Yeah, I can understand when you're trying to get somewhere. So you
Yeah.
had to fly from Port Moresby to Kujip. Is that how you pronounce the town?
Yeah, that's where we ended up. The airport, I don't think was actually in Kujip. We drove from the airport to Kujip.
Hmm.
But we ended up finally getting a flight the next day, which our original flight, they hand wrote on our old tickets. They like hand wrote 9 a.m. and like a flight number. So we didn't even actually get tickets that night. We ended up going to a hotel. We ate dinner, showered, and had a night's rest. Got up in the morning, went back to the airport and tried to get, like the physical tickets for our flight.
Right.
And they tell us that the flight was changed from what it was supposed to be 11 a.m., that it was now changed to 3:45 p.m.
Hmm.
And then like an hour later, it got changed again to like 1 p.m. And we go to check in for the flight, and the lady's like, "You guys don't have seats on this flight."
Nice.
So we end up,
Well, what kind of a plane goes from like? I'm assuming you were on like a 7 something 7 going to from Australia to Port Moresby.
so the plane from Australia to Port Moresby was smaller than like the rest of
Seven.
the planes, but
Uh
it
huh.
wasn't as small.
Okay.
The the one from Port Moresby to Kujip was very small. There was only two rows of seats. So there was two seats on one side, two seats on the other side, and I think 9 seats back.
I see. Interesting.
Um,
Now you did give me some photos. I'm gonna share them. Do you mind if we just go because they're not in any particular order? And as I share the screen, do you mind just explaining what we're looking at, and then we'll just go through the photos? Does that make sense to you?
yeah,
Okay. So let me share the screen here. So we'll start with this one. This is obviously in the airport. Yes. Can you see it
yeah.
on
So
your end?
that
Yeah.
was Air New Guinea. That's
Uh
the
huh.
flight we had to take from Port Moresby um, to Kujip.
It's funny how they spell that. Is that how you would appropriately spell Papua New Guinea? In the United States, they spell it Guinea, I think.
Yeah, I don't know as far as like their spelling goes. Their alphabet is slightly different than
Mm-hmm.
ours.
Well, you had mentioned before we started recording the talk pigeon. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, yeah. So it's talk pigeon. It's like TOK, and then I don't know if it's actually spelled like the like the
Like the
animal
bird?
pigeon.
But you
Yeah,
said you said even when they're speaking that way, you can kind of understand what they're saying. A couple of words here and there. So it sounds like there's a lot of English influence in the language to begin with.
yeah.
Yeah.
There is an English influence, and it was kind of interesting because you could kind of understand parts of what people were saying when they were speaking in pidgin. Um, Thankfully, my friend Rebecca is fluent in pidgin, so she was able to translate for us once we finally got to her.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the other struggles, I guess, once we left Australia was we no longer had access to internet or cellular service.
Ah,
So there was no way to contact anyone. So when we got stuck in the airport, there was no way to contact someone to be like, oh, where do we go? What do we do?
right. You brought up a good point because I meant to mention this in the beginning. You went with your sister
Mhm.
and ostensibly to visit a childhood friend of yours who, as you were describing, is a missionary there.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so that was the premise of the trip to begin with. I should have said that in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah. So um she's lived there for about 2.5 years.
Hmm.
and she's been back to the US, I believe, one time in that time frame.
Wow.
So we wanted to go visit her, and
And
had the
she's
opportunity.
and
Mhm.
she's a nurse there.
No, so she's actually a teacher,
Oh, okay.
but she is working on a medical base because it's through like a missions organization.
Hmm.
So a lot of the doctors there have like their whole families. They go there and live there and work at the hospital.
So it's sort of like a Doctors Without Borders type organization, if not that very same organization.
Yeah, I don't think it's technically through that, but they might be. I'm not sure if they're like affiliated or not.
Right. Okay.
Um, but yeah,
So you had a lot of problems getting there, but it was worth it, right?
yeah. So actually, also during our time getting there, there was another family who was moving there. A family who was like a doctor, his wife, and their 6 children.
Hmm.
So we
This
ended
ma-
up kind of
this I'm sorry.
meeting.
Yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead.
We kind of ended up meeting with them in LA, and flew from LA um, to Australia with them. And they had like 27 bags because they're moving their whole life there,
Mm.
and their 6 children and car seats and everything like that. So um, that's how we ended up with car seats, um, because when our flight was canceled, everything was already loaded onto the plane.
Hmm.
Um,
And this
so
this photo we're looking at now is that the plane you took from Port Moresby to um, that town,
yes,
Coogip.
yes.
Yeah.
So
So
this
it's a
is the Mhm.
halfway decent sized plane. It looks like a propeller plane, but a halfway decent size.
Yeah, so they actually were doing work on the airport in Kujip.
Hmm.
It's not really in Kujip, but like outside of Kujip where we flew in.
Right.
Um, so that airport, the runway had work being done, so we had to take this size plane versus the plane size up from this, because they couldn't, I guess with a bigger plane, like they can't stop.
Well, with your permission, you had mentioned, if you don't mind me showing one photo of, if I could find it. It was a picture of you carrying a you carrying a here it is. I'll share this one. A baby seat.
Yes,
Yeah.
so these are the baby seats. We ended up with 3 of them, and had to carry them from the airport to the hotel, and then from the hotel back to the airport. And we were 3 grown women just carrying around with no children, carrying 3 baby
just
seats.
just in case a baby shows up. Yeah.
It
Well,
was it was very entertaining.
is that this photo is taken in Papua New Guinea? Excuse me, in Port Moresby.
Yes, so
Okay.
this is the hotel that we stayed in Port Moresby. Um, and this is the morning of our second day there, trying to get onto a flight. We, repacked up and had our baby carriers and went to the airport again.
Well, since you had that unexpected layover in Port Moresby, were you able to explore a little bit Port Moresby?
So not so much. It's not really the safest to travel without a mail.
Okay, we're going to get to that a little further into the conversation.
Right. So we ended up just going like from the airport to the hotel in one of like the hotel's vans.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up meeting these other missionaries that live in the country, and they helped us get this hotel. So like that was really, really nice of them and helpful, because like we didn't know them, they were strangers, but they, saw 3 women who, are obviously not locals, and kind of came over and just kind of asked us if we were okay, and they were like, well, we'll help you. So
Yeah,
they were really nice, and
yeah.
able to help us get a hotel and get back to the airport and
Well,
everything.
there's good people everywhere, no matter where you go.
Yeah.
Somebody always willing to help you out. So you finally land in Kujip or the
Mhm.
airport and end up in Kujip. Is that where this photo is from? This is actually my background shot.
Yes. So this is one of the nurses at the hospital. This is like where she lives.
Is that near the village you stayed in?
Yeah, so it's like it's walking distance, but
Uh-huh.
they don't have they don't have electricity, they don't have running water. Um most of the village people, most of the people that like are natively from the country don't have a lot of wealth.
Uh-huh.
And so they live in grass huts and they build them themselves, and they do a lot of farming in order to, have food and things like that.
So they live off the land, which is good. Where you stayed though had plumbing and electricity and
Yes.
a few of the amenities of
Yes, we
modern.
did thankfully have some modern amenities.
Yeah.
We actually at the medical base, we also did have some access to internet. It wasn't, and nothing like the US. Like we complain when our internet is slow, but it's nothing like their internet there is um spotty at best.
Mm-hmm.
It would work for like 10 minutes and then it would just cut out.
Yeah.
So
So
we kind of
when you say medical base, was it a military medical base or
No, so it was funded by an organization, like religious organization.
uh-huh.
It's part of the Nazarene missions,
Okay.
and so they basically like built this hospital and with like housing around the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a water source. They collect rainwater, and um, that way they have running water throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then they have electric there. And it's like it's fenced in, and they have security that like patrols the fence.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I would think
so
they
that
would thankfully they have the electricity if they're going to be operating on people.
right,
Yeah.
yes.
So but this is so this these two huts are in the village you stayed in then.
They're
But
right outside.
okay, but you didn't
Yeah.
actually stay in something like that, right?
No, we
Okay.
stayed in a modern, like almost like a townhome style.
So you were telling me a little bit about how they greet you there. Did they know you were from America? Americans?
Yes. So
Okay.
we
And
are
I'll share
very,
this. I don't know if you can see that
yeah,
picture there. So what
yeah,
happens when you first got into the village? They picked you up. What did your friend? What's your friend's first name?
Rebecca.
She picked you up at the airport, or had you picked up from the airport? You and your sister?
Yes, and her mother as well.
Oh, her mother. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was the three years got picked up and sent to and you went into the village and they greeted you with these things.
Yes, so they greeted us with PNG hats and handmade leis from like flowers and other plants that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And they sang us a native song in Pidgin, and so it was really sweet and very very kind of them to do that. And they actually gave us it's called a belum. It's like a they they're like hand woven bags, and all the women there carry them. A lot of times they actually carry they carry produce in them, they carry babies in them.
Mm.
So they really do use those pretty frequently. So they actually handmade us each some
Mm-hmm.
of these bags, and so they gave us gifts and things like that, because all the locals there really like Rebecca. She's great, and she's actually teaching a bunch of local women how to read and write because they don't all get the opportunity to go to school as kids.
Mm-hmm.
um, so she's teaching not only the missionary children, their normal like K through 12, but she's also teaching local women who are nursing students and friends of nursing students and things like that how to read and write in Pidgin.
Okay, not in English, in talk pidgin.
No,
Okay.
yeah,
So they made you feel welcome and at home as soon as you got there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's sweet. Yeah. Yeah. And did you feel welcome and at home?
yeah. It was interesting because I was forewarned before going that we would all be stared at, but people who, don't know Rebecca definitely stared at us a lot more.
Okay. But is she fairly well known within that village?
Yeah, within the village, she's made friends with people, where a lot of the locals there that do live in the medical base, like if you work at the hospital, you can live in the medical base.
Hmm.
So a lot of the nurses and people who work there, who are locals, very much like her, because she's one of the people that learned the language fluently and very much kind of embraced the culture,
Uh-huh.
and the cultural differences, where a lot of people coming from the US want to bring their like US comforts with them
Correct. Yeah. Hmm.
and want to kind of like change how the locals live, where she very much embraced it and was like, okay, like this is how we do it here. That's cool.
That's probably the best approach to have when you're a stranger coming into a new, no matter where you are in the world, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Same thing in France. How come you French people can't speak English? Although it seems like most people do anyway. But
Yeah.
so good. They made you feel nice and welcome as soon as you got there. So I'm gonna. I think the next shot I'm gonna show is of. I'm assuming some of the villagers, right? I don't know if you can see that.
Yes. So this is when we first were welcomed in. So that's when we arrived.
Now, can you walk us through like some of these folks, like the one on the far left of the photo? Is
Yeah.
that
So that is my friend Rebecca, all the way on the left. The
so? She's
the
the actual one that's doing missionary work there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Um, I don't recall the all the locals' names.
No, that's I
Um,
would be expected. The one in the
yeah.
center, I'm assuming, is Rebecca's mom with the red hat on.
Yes. And then
Okay.
next to her on the right, that's my sister, and then
Okay.
myself,
Okay. So
for
now I
this
was going to
photo.
ask you, and you had uh, before we started recording, you were telling me a little bit about this. There is a cultural difference, glaring one, in that women can't wear pants. I know you locally don't wear dresses normally, but you had to wear one when you were in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah. So on the actual base, you could wear pants if they were like more baggy.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you like stepped off of the base, you really did need to be, as a woman, you needed to be covered. Um, they find Different cultures find different things like inappropriate. So there it's kind of inappropriate for women to show anything above your knee.
Mm-hmm.
So and they also don't like anything like that's tight, like that kind of clings to you.
Mm-hmm.
So they wear dresses and skirts in order to be like respectful of their bodies there.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what they consider appropriate for women.
Right. Is it a predominant? I don't know much about Papua New Guinea. This is why I'm glad to have you on to learn a little bit for myself and to vicariously travel. Because I'm stuck here in Millbrook. But is this photo from the base?
Yes, so this photo is from the base.
Okay, because I see the lady standing next to Rebecca's mother is wearing pants as well as Rebecca's mother.
Yes.
Yeah. But if they came off the base, they'd have to put a dress on.
Yeah, every once in a while in town, like you would see somebody wearing, like a woman wearing pants, but not very common. And we already kind of stand out enough just being, from the US,
Mm-hmm.
that we didn't want to be we didn't want to come off as disrespectful to their culture or anything like
Right.
that. So we decided we would wear, what's more culturally acceptable there.
Is Was that the only glaring difference between the sexes there that you could determine in the time you were there? You were there a couple of weeks.
No, so actually, surprisingly enough, as almost um, sexist as it felt for, women to have to wear certain clothing in order to be deemed, appropriate,
Mm-hmm.
they the women did most of the heavy lifting, which was interesting because in the US, you know, traditionally you would be like the men would do the heavy lifting or like the physical labor and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where in Papua New Guinea, the women do a lot of that. You see women with bilums, these bags, these like hand knitted bags full of fruits and vegetables and things like that, and they have them like almost resting on their foreheads
Yeah.
to like carry the weight.
In baskets. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and the women do a lot of farm work and like they plant the crops, they harvest the crops, and they do a lot more physical labor than the men do there.
What role do the men do
Um,
fill there?
so it was interesting. You did see men kind of like weaving the walls to the grass huts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was I didn't ask too many questions about, like what do they kind of do? But it definitely seemed like the women did a large portion of the work where the men did not do so much.
Mm-hmm. And I'm assuming there's a whole plethora of different tribes or villages close together to one another.
Yeah, so they have a lot of different tribes within the
Mm-hmm.
country, and they kind of stick to their own tribe. So um, when they're talking about like marrying people and things like that, they kind of want to stay within their own tribe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they have like tribal wars that they get into over somebody they carry around these knives they call like bush knives. So they get into like fights with other people and they end up like they call it a chop chop, where they basically like cut each other up with knives, like they have a knife fight.
Mm-hmm.
So the government there has put in place that like if you go to the hospital and it's because of a fight that you went to the hospital, you get like an extra fee because they do have like I guess like universal health care.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's due to a fight, like you end up getting charged. So most people just end up lying and saying like, oh, I was just doing something else and it was accidental or whatever. So they don't get charged. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of violence within the culture,
Mm-hmm.
especially between different tribes.
So predominantly the time you were there, were you with one specific tribe or did you go to other surrounding villages/tribes?
So within this base, there are multiple tribes because it's technically they have like a nursing college on the campus as well, like on the base.
Uh-huh.
So there are multiple tribes within where we were staying, but
Uh-huh.
we did end up going out into two different tribes where it was a Saturday, Sunday, and we went one on Saturday, one on Sunday. And they cooked for us in the style it's called a moo.
Yeah.
And so they like cook us a meal in the ground.
Actually, we'll get to that in a minute because you did show me some photos of that, which I'll share to our YouTube audience anyway. But back to this photo, I just before we
Mhm.
moved on from it, I'm going to assume just from looking at their faces that all of the locals in this photo are related.
Yes, so they are a family.
They all
And
have the same kind of smile. So,
yeah.
and then the one on the far right in the photo, she plays guitar.
Yes, so they sang us a song in Pidgin when we first got there. So she played guitar while they all sang.
I'd love to know what that sounded like. Are they is there anything would compare it to describe what it sounds like?
Um
After
I
this recording, I could probably find a sample of it on YouTube. You can find everything on
yeah.
YouTube. But I'm
I
just
think
curious.
actually my sister might have a video of it. I could probably get to you.
Okay, but I was just curious what their native songs sound like. I'm very curious about that. But the tribes now, you had multiple tribes within the medical base,
Mhm.
and then you went to two other tribes. Did all of those tribes get along with one another generally?
Um, for the most part, the ones around the area kind of keep the peace, but I don't think they really interact very much. Um,
Really? What about the two that were on the around the medical base?
they're
They
like
must have interaction with one another.
they do have some interaction, but most of the tribes are very self-sustainable. So because they don't really do, they don't have running water, they don't have electricity, they don't have things like that. They don't have like what we would consider traditional jobs.
Hmm.
Um, so most of the locals kind of just farm and build houses for their offspring. um they have really large families, and the traditionally the men are not polyamorous, or not, they are polyamorous, so like they have multiple wives sometimes,
Wow.
so they'll have like multiple homes for their wives, and they end up having a ton of children because they don't have modern medicine really, so like it's not like they have birth control and things like that,
Hmm.
so they have a lot of children
Did
per
you,
family.
in general, did you find it a crowded place?
Yeah, everyone's kind of on top of each other. We went
Oh,
to a
really?
couple, yeah, we went to a couple markets, which was really interesting. And unfortunately, I could not get photos because it was not safe to have like your cell phone out or a camera out. Um, but it was very close. Like everyone's very close and kind of on top of each other. And
When you say, I'm sorry, when you say it's not safe, do you mean they don't want you to take photos, or the camera could have been stolen, or what do you mean by not safe?
yeah, so if you have anything of value like out in the open,
Hmm.
it's very likely to be stolen. And if say someone came up to say I had my phone out and somebody came up and like tried to take my phone, I can't like fight back, um, because they will either like use one of the machetes and cut you, or like they have guns there as well. So it's been known to where someone will be shot over, fighting back.
Is there
Um,
any kind of what we would call a police department or a police force there?
yes, but actually, while we were in the village, the in one of like the towns, we were just like by a grocery store, and there was some little activity going on and there were cops, and we traveled with someone like who is more familiar with the area, so someone who is like a local but works for the hospital as like a guard,
Hmm.
so they come with you if you leave the base.
Ah,
And so there was a point where he was like, there's cops, like get out of here.
oh.
um so yeah, so that was interesting to see, where it was like,
Were you ever afraid for your safety when you were there for the couple of weeks?
not really,
No.
not personally at least. It was I trusted, I trust obviously my friend Rebecca, and like she's lived there for 2.5 years, so
Uh huh.
I trusted her judgment on, where she would take us, or
Right.
where we would go.
I kind of I can kind of see why you took this photo, because it's almost like an artistic photo. It's actually pretty cool. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but
Yeah.
you could describe to those who are listening and not watching what we're looking at.
Yeah, so this is another one of their, their buildings, where they would either live, or they also have ones, some buildings like this that they cook in, so they have cookhouses, um in order to, cook while it's raining or something like that. Otherwise they'll cook over, like a fire or something like that. But this is so that they can still cook regardless of the weather,
Now,
because
is it do they cook for the entire tribe, or is it for an individual family, or how does that work?
so I think it depends on, like, kind of depends on the tribe. This specific one, she would cook for her family. She had a couple kids, and then she had some like foster kids that lived with her.
Hmm.
Um, so she just cooked for, her family and extended family too. But a lot of times the tribes are kind of all related. Um, because they do try and stay within their tribe, like while marrying and things like that. So
Hmm.
everyone in the tribe is typically related.
Now, if two people from two different tribes marry, is that like a big scandal there, or how does that treated?
Yeah, they don't like it too much.
Mm.
It does happen, but definitely frowned upon.
Mm. I see Coca-Cola made its way to Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, so it was interesting because they do have imports from Australia and New Zealand.
Hmm.
So they do have some products that we have. But a lot of it is more so like, for instance, there it's scrap that they got somewhere in order to use as, a form of siding.
So
Um,
it's not advertising Coca-Cola. It's covering a hole in the wall.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, well, that's all right. Whatever keeps the rain out, right?
yeah.
Mm. It's an interesting photo. I sort of kind of glad you took that photo. Now you gotta explain this next photo to me. Um, who this gentleman is, and just describe it for those who are listening and not watching.
Yeah, so this is a man who makes wood engraved carving. Uh, I guess they're like a tchotchke kind of thing,
Is it bamboo? What kind of wood is it?
Yeah, so his specifically are bamboo. Bamboo grows really well there, so they have a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he calls himself Lost Man.
Lost man, lost
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
Okay.
So he goes around kind of like from door to door and sells these souvenirs, these wood carved souvenirs to
Mm-hmm.
people who visit. Um,
Can
so
you
he
see on?
comes,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you see on your end me zooming in?
yeah,
Okay, because I want to get a little closer to the actual stuff he makes. That's
yeah,
pretty cool from my vantage point.
yeah. It was very, very interesting, and very like intricate.
Mm-hmm.
So their dollar is much less than our US dollar. I think it's about like a third of the US dollar, as far as value goes. So it seems like he makes a decent amount off of, selling these wooden pieces.
Uh huh.
And he was very kind, and just wanted to see if we wanted anything else, and he like offered to make us whatever we wanted. And
Oh,
um
nice.
yeah, we ended up buying a couple things from him.
Did he explain? Well, first of all, you could understand him fairly well in the
Um,
talk pigeon.
no, but Rebecca translates.
Oh, okay. Oh, so she speaks fluent.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
talk. What did I say? Talk pigeon. Is that the right way to say it?
Mhm.
Um, I'm just curious if you were able to discuss with him how long he's been doing it. Was it passed down from his father? Did you get into any of that?
No one really knows.
Okay.
It's interesting. There's a lot of like just unsure things. Like nobody knows how old they are.
Uh huh.
Um, they they gauge age by Christmas. So instead of asking like how old are you, you'll say like how many Christmases do you have? Actually, I think it's how many Christmases have you or something like that. Um, and that's like asking how old they are. But
Interesting.
most people don't know. Like they'll be like, "Oh, well, I completed grade 12." And they don't really have an age. Like if they do go to school, they don't have an age, like a specific age they start. It's just if they can go, they go whenever they can. But you have to pay for school.
Ah.
So a lot of people can't afford it.
Hmm. Interesting. So, would you say well, at least in the areas you were in,
Mhm.
would be predominantly Christian?
Yeah, at least this part of Papua New Guinea was the I believe it was the Swedish people came over and kind of brought Christianity into the country back in the I think they said it was like the 50s. Um, and
Oh.
so a large portion of them are um, religiously Christian.
Hmm.
And they have a lot of churches. They call them bush churches, so they just kind of worship outside. And so we did end up going to a bush church while we were there, which was definitely an interesting experience.
Hmm. And who presides over that? Would it be called a priest?
They just, I don't know what they call them in Pigeon, but we called them a pastor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that would there be? There has to be some sort of Muslim element at least in the country, right? Maybe not in the area you went to.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I know there is, there are other religions
Yeah.
practiced,
Hmm.
but they have a lot of like tribal
Rit-
practices, I think,
Rituals,
more than,
right?
yeah.
Is it? Do you think we were discussing before about the necessity for women to wear skirts is a tribal thing?
Um, I'm not really sure because even when they originally, when other countries originally like came there, they didn't wear clothing because they didn't have clothing.
Hmm.
So clothes really weren't even, introduced to them um, until later on. So I'm not really sure where the skirts came into play.
Hmm. Or why it's an issue at all, right? Since they
Right,
didn't have clothes at all.
right.
Um, Interesting. Yeah. He seems like a guy I'd love to have a conversation with. I'd love to know how he got into that. I would have loved to have seen him actually make one of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So now you were telling me about you mentioned earlier in the podcast about muumuus, which is in ground cooking, as you described it, right?
Yes. So this is a picture of the first moo we went to. And they cooked chickens and cow, which is cow is like a root vegetable that's very similar to like a baked, or not a baked potato, a sweet potato.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar in like shape and texture, I guess. It's a little more like starchy and not so much flavor
Is that what
in
the two ladies are working on there in the photo?
yeah, so there's actually pieces of chickens in there. So like the heads of the chickens are in there.
And what is that leafy stuff? Is it like cabbage or?
So that is banana leaves.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's what they wrap the like hot rocks in, and in order to keep the rocks like separate from the chicken.
And how did it taste?
I mean, it tasted like chicken. It was
I would hope so. If it didn't, they're in trouble. Yeah.
they didn't really like season. So like in the US, we use a lot of stuff on our food. We season everything. They really only season with salt.
Okay. So they do use salt. Okay.
Yeah, so it
Yeah.
wasn't as like
But
flavorful.
what about the banana? Did the taste of the banana come through in the chicken?
No,
Or you
no.
think it gets cooked off, you think?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think it's like there's not actual banana, it's just the leaves from it.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, yeah, you said that. Yeah.
yeah, so I think there's just not really a flavor for from it. But
It's making me hungry. Huh. Um, there's another one of the same style. Hold it. So this, okay, so they look like they're wearing traditional tribal outfits, no?
yeah, so these are their traditional like Kujip
Oops, sorry.
style dress.
Uh-huh. I didn't know I could go forward that way. I'm learning as I go. Sorry.
So this one's actually in a town called Jakarta.
Oh, well, I know Jakarta. Yeah.
So this is um the dresses they're wearing. Like I thought it was adorable because they all matched and just looked really cute. And this is also a muumuu, but it's slightly different because they did have it a little bit more above ground. They kind of had it like inside of a like piece of metal.
Oh, is that what's covered in? Now, what is that covered in? Burlap or what is that?
Yeah, the top there is definitely some kind of like sack, like a potato sack kind of
Oh,
thing.
potato sack. Okay.
But
Yeah.
they still have the leaves, the banana leaves underneath.
Right. And what's underneath the banana leaves in this one?
Chicken and
Oh,
and they had some other kind of greens and things like that in this one. Um,
is that the only meat that they ate there when you were there?
well, that's the only meat that they fed us.
Oh, so you think they had a like special moo because you guys were visitors?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's cool. Yeah.
Yes. They definitely eat things that we would not eat in the US.
Okay. I think we'll stop there because I'm still on to the chicken.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no fire. Like, how does it get cooked?
So they have a fire elsewhere where they basically just they put stones in the fire and make the stones hot, and then they like bury the stones with all the food, and the hot stones cook the food.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And you found it good?
Yeah, I mean it was fully cooked and tasted like, like normal food.
Hmm.
Um so yeah.
Did you eat with your hands?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So Rebecca did bring us silverware in the event we wanted to use it, but we, especially this one here, we kind of just like all sat on the ground with everybody else, and we just ate with our hands.
Do the villagers generally eat with their hands?
Yeah.
Okay. So when in Rome, you do as the Romans, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did use paper plates. Well, I think they were bamboo plates, like made out of bamboo, but they were disposable plates. Where the locals used like a piece of banana leaf as a plate.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, it looks good. So now tell me a little bit about this next one. As you said, this was a military, and I'm sorry, a medical base.
Hmm.
And this photo, I think, is from one of the hospital rooms.
Yeah, so we got to take a tour of the hospital on base, and this is actually the emergency room
Mm,
for their hospital there.
wow.
Yeah, so definitely not somewhere that I would want to be
You don't
in
want to
the
get sick or
emergency
get
room.
hurt in Papua New Guinea. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, well, despite the time that I got sick in Papua New Guinea,
Well, we're going to discuss that if you don't mind.
yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Well, they look like they have fairly well stocked supplies there, you know?
they do. So they do have a lot of like volunteer people who send supplies and things like that.
Uh huh.
And they do have a pretty good backstock of medical supplies like medications and whatever else they need for a hospital. But they only get like shipment. I think it's like twice a year.
Wow.
So they do their best to keep in stock what they need, but they're in such need for medical care because there is a violent culture still where people do get injured pretty frequently.
Mm.
Uh, so they
Especially with all those machetes flying around.
yeah, so they definitely need more supplies than they're really able to get, but they do the best they can.
So tell us a little bit about where and when and how and for how long you were sick.
Yeah, so we're not really sure how. The how is in question. So they don't really have ways to test what I ended up sick with. But the doctor's conclusion there was that I ended up with either some kind of bacterial infection type thing or a parasite of some kind. Um, it was on, I believe, day 3 of the trip.
Wow.
So
Do you think you
I
got
just
it from? I'm sorry.
no, you're good. I just wasn't feeling the best the one night, and so I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna call it early. I think it's different food, so I was like, maybe my stomach just isn't really used
And
to.
you think it might have been something you ate?
Yeah, so they always say, like, if you go to another country, especially like a third world country like this, don't drink the water. So we had, where we were staying, we had filtered water, we had a filtration system. So we obviously drank the filtered water, but we did go into town and we got food at a like a local coffee. It was like a coffee place, but it was almost like a restaurant. And so we got food there, and um, you just don't know. Like, we didn't cook the food ourselves, so I don't really know if it was from there or from somewhere else, but I ended up violently ill, and I ended up sleeping. I'm not a fan of germs or bugs, and I ended up sleeping on the bathroom floor of the place we were staying
Oh my gosh.
for 11 hours,
Oh boy.
and I was just sick the entire time. I was ended up extremely dehydrated.
What's your sister's first name?
Scarlet.
It was Scarlett, and Rebecca's mom sick also?
So, my sister did end up getting sick, but not nearly to the extent that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think she threw up once. And then we ended up getting medication from a doctor there. They got us these like neon yellow pills that'll like basically just kill whatever's inside of you.
Hmm.
So it's like a 3-day treatment. So I started taking those as soon as I got them. I just assumed I ate something that bothered my stomach, so I didn't really think anything of it until I was sick for 11 hours straight.
Wow. But
And then at that point I was like, can you please get a doctor?
well, I would too, yeah, if I were in your position, sure.
Yeah.
Now, those when you started taking those pills, did that kick in right away?
So as soon as I started taking the pills, I stopped throwing up. But I didn't feel good. I lost 2 full days of our travel time because I slept through one of the days. Just, I think my body was just trying to recover. And I wasn't eating anything. And so I had nothing in my body, and I felt really weak, and I was still really dehydrated. So I was I was sipping water every 15 minutes because if I drank any more than that, I would throw up.
The filtered water?
Yes, the
Yeah.
filtered water.
Yeah. So what did you have, like water from that coffee shop you were in?
Yeah, so I did, and I assumed it was purified, and we were with a couple other people from the medical base, and they were all like, yeah, we come here all the time, like we drink their water. So there was no one had ever gotten sick before that they knew of from
Do you remember
there.
what you
So
ate in the coffee shop?
I thought that, but Rebecca and I ate the same thing and she didn't get sick, so I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, she's been there a while though. But what about Scarlett? Did she eat the same thing as you?
No, and she also didn't drink the water. So I'm not really not sure. And even the doctors there are like, yeah, we don't know. It just kind of happens sometimes.
Yeah, random. Yeah, but I'm glad
Yeah.
it didn't last long. So, but you did lose a day or two in the recovery process.
Yes.
But it
Yes.
sounds like those. You don't know what the name of that pill was, right?
I don't. I think my sister has it written down somewhere because she was like, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it sounds like I like to keep a couple in my nightstand there.
Yeah.
Just in case. It's interesting though. So, so you were you there for a full 2 weeks?
No. So the travel time ended up taking up multiple days. So originally we were supposed to be there for 11 days,
Mm-hmm.
and we ended up there for like 9.5.
Okay, the rest of it was eaten up by delays.
Yes.
There's one more photo I wanted you to talk about. I don't think I've shown this already.
Yeah. So this was at the first moo.
Okay, so this is what came out of the ground when they were done cooking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So
So
you see that?
I see. I'm sorry. I see Rebecca and I see your sister with the hat on directly over your right shoulder.
Yes.
I'm curious who the one with the glasses is.
Yeah, so she is one of the doctors at the hospital.
Okay.
She's actually the only female OBGYN,
In all of Papua New Guinea or in that general area?
at least in that area. I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Is she American?
Yes, she's
Okay.
from, I want to say like Michigan or something
Okay.
of that nature.
All right.
Mhm.
So, and these friendly folks here are the ones that served you
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So this was actually the gentleman on the left-hand side there. He kind of runs a home for disabled people.
Uh-huh.
So anyone who's disabled within, Papua New Guinea, he'll take in.
Wow.
So if you can't really tell here in this photo, but his hands, when he was born, his fingers grew together. So he basically has like 2 fingers per hand.
Mm-hmm.
So him growing up that way, he kind of had a soft spot for people with some kind of disability.
Right.
And so he ended up starting this charity for anyone who has any kind of disability. So he has
Interesting.
somebody living with him who is he has somebody who's blind. I know he has somebody who has some sort of autism of some sort,
Mm-hmm.
where he's to the point where he's like nonverbal, and they're not really sure like how much he can hear because he doesn't speak, so you don't really know if he can like fully hear you. And he had a couple other people who had some disabilities, and he said he kind of like anybody who has a disability, like they are more than welcome to come, because a lot of families can't really support someone who can't like physically do the work on like in their area where they live.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, is there hunters within these tribes? People that go out and hunt?
Um, you know, I'm not actually sure. I would assume kind of. They they didn't really seem like you didn't see a lot of animals besides like stray dogs or farm animals that they kind of owned.
Uh-huh.
Um, so a lot of them do keep like chickens and things like that for, food purposes. They also have pigs. Pigs are like, if you have a pig in Papua New Guinea, like you're wealthy.
Oh.
Um, but other than that, you really didn't see many animals. They, the country itself has a lot of birds and things like that, but it didn't seem like there was too much hunting going on.
Mm. Well, I think you alluded to the fact that they might not have had chicken if you guys weren't there. That was like a celebratory meal on your
Yeah.
arrival.
Yeah. So they said they eat a lot of grain, um,
And
a lot of,
vegetation.
yeah, a lot of, basically if they can grow it, they'll eat it. So I don't think they eat a lot of meats in
Mm-hmm.
general.
Mm-hmm. Well, did they enjoy the chicken, do you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a rare treat for them. Is that how they viewed it?
Well, they also don't have a way to like store food, so if it's going to go bad, if they don't eat it, it's going to go bad, then they're not really going to cook it.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
So you were there for give or take 9 days, as minus 11 minus the travel hiccups.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about your trip back. Did you get to see anything? Well, tell us about your trip back. I don't want to
Yeah.
jump ahead of you.
So we ended up flying from, where we were staying in Kujip, and then we flew back to Port Moresby,
Mm-hmm.
which thankfully that flight went as planned. Was not on time, but as planned. So we get back to Port Moresby, and then we are back to flying with Qantas.
So you
So
didn't spend on the way back. You didn't spend a lot of time in Port Moresby.
no,
No,
thankfully.
no. But you
we
did.
we had like a hour and a half before our flight.
So you
So
stayed in the airport.
yeah,
All
we
right.
just
But
we just
that other time, is it a crowded area? I'm just curious about Port Moresby.
um yeah, there's a lot of in and out traffic because there's a lot of layovers there.
Oh, around
And
the airport. Okay.
yeah, and there is more of a tourist destination. I think a lot of people from Australia and like surrounding countries that are really close by if you're like an avid hiker or a scuba diver or things like that, it seemed people were traveling there for activities like that.
I see. Okay. Yeah.
But
So
that
Qantas goes no other place in Papua New Guinea other than Port Moresby.
they might go, they potentially go to a couple other places, but I'm not positive.
Okay.
They definitely don't go to, the really small airports though.
Right. Which is where you ended up going. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So you, but with, except for the time, a little bit of a time difference, the Qantas took off relatively on time from Port Moresby,
Yes. There
flying
was
you where?
flying us to Brisbane, Australia. And then my sister and I ended up adding a flight for the two of us to go to Sydney, Australia, because we were going to have an 11-hour layover. We could add an hour flight to Sydney and have the 11-hour layover in Sydney, Australia, or we can have the layover in LA. And since we had never been to Australia before, we decided to have our layover in Australia.
Well, that's a wise move. Do you remember the one thing I asked you to check before you went on this trip?
Check. No.
Yeah. The how the toilet flushes over there.
Oh,
Does the water go counterclockwise?
okay. So the toilet, you're like the fourth person now that I've had this conversation with.
Oh, I
So
think the other three were me in various times.
it could be. It could be. So the toilets don't flush the same, but they don't go like one direction or the other direction. They just go straight down. There's like a flap in the inside of the toilet. And when you flush it, it's a button and you like push the button and the flap opens and the water just goes straight down.
Yeah, because they're doing that to so Americans won't stand there and stare at the water going down
Yeah, they don't want everybody to be in the bathroom with a spectacle.
with cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. So you made the wise decision to spend a little time in Sydney, right?
Yes. So it was dark for most of our 11 hours there, but we made the most of it.
Oh, you got there late at night. You said, right?
We landed,
Yeah.
I think, at like 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So we ended up going and walking. We went to the hotel, checked in, and then we went and walked on the pier, and saw the Sydney Opera House and the I can't remember the name of the bridge, but it's like a famous bridge there.
Mm-hmm.
Harbor Bridge. I think
Okay.
that's what it is. So we got to see that, but it was nighttime, but still something cool to see. And then we went back to the hotel. We slept for like 3 hours, showered after, not having the showers in Papua New Guinea. We had showers. We were able to shower, but they were not hot water.
Mm.
And depending on time of day, depends on how hot your water is there. So we had, what felt like an American shower.
Before you move out of Australia, I meant to ask you while we were still in Papua New Guinea, because I am traveling vicariously through your story.
Yes.
What is the temperature there when you were there? And you went there in early April of 2023, as we're talking.
Yes. So they do their weather in Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like 20 degrees Celsius when we woke up in the morning. Like it was never cold. I don't think it got below like 67 degrees like Fahrenheit, but it was definitely closer to like 70s, 80s. So it was nice, but it was still like the end of their rainy season.
Mm-hmm.
So it did rain every day.
I don't know if they're in the monsoon belt. I think they are. They get monsoon season there.
I don't know, but they definitely like consider it. They have two seasons. Like they have rainy season, they have dry season, and
Oh,
that's it.
and you were there in the rainy season, but it didn't rain.
Yes.
It didn't rain that much.
Well, it rained every day, but it was like pretty convenient as far as timing goes. Like during the day, it wasn't really rainy. It was more so rainy in the afternoon. Once like it started getting dark out, it would start like downpouring.
Uh-huh. But
But
is
you
it
can't.
it just rains for a few minutes and then clears up?
No, it
Oh,
rained like all night.
Oh, I was saying like in the Caribbean or even in like Puerto Rico, it would rain, or even Florida, it'll rain like every day for 10 seconds
Yeah.
and then be sunny out. It's not like that in Papua New Guinea.
No, well, it was one day that happened. Yeah.
Hmm.
But almost every night it rained during the night, which was honestly very peaceful. There's a lot of animals, like bird type animals there that make a lot of noise at night.
Really?
They have these bats. They don't call them bats, but they're like giant bats.
Hmm.
I think they're called I don't know. They're called something weird that to us doesn't make sense because if you look at them, they look like a bat.
Hmm.
Um, and they make like their wings when they fly make this really loud like smacking noise, almost like it sounds like ducks are walking across the roof.
Wow. That
So
sounds annoying as hell.
yeah. So when it rained, the rain kind of either it drowned them out or they didn't fly because it was raining.
And
I'm not quite sure.
do they have, they don't have any kind of, do they have television there? Or? I know you
Not
mentioned they
really.
have intermittent internet. I was curious
Yeah.
if they had any
So
kind of broadcast television there
in
or
in
radio for that matter.
in the big cities, what they consider to be a big city, yeah, they have some television, but not really.
Hmm.
Not like we do.
Hmm.
There were TVs in the airport, um, and at the hospital they did have some TVs, but it wasn't like a broadcast of TV. It was just a TV, and then they would put like the hospital would put things on it,
Oh,
but not really,
okay.
not like a show or anything like
Like
that. It
an
was more like
advertising station.
informational.
Okay. A community, what a bulletin board type TV.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, unfortunately, when you were in Sydney, it was at night and you didn't experience any nightlife there, or but you did go to the opera house.
So there is no nightlife in Sydney.
Okay.
Everything's closed.
Nice.
Um,
What day of the week was it? I'm curious.
it was a Monday. We got there on a Monday.
Okay.
We woke up Tuesday morning and I convinced my sister to go watch the sunrise at the Sydney Opera House with me. Um, so we did get to see the sunrise and then get to the airport for our flight.
Well, that
Uh,
sounds interesting enough. Yeah. How was the sunrise?
and we got coffee. We got coffee on the at the pier.
Yeah.
Um,
So, but you only had 3 hours of sleep
yeah,
that night, but you knew you had one hell of a plane ride back to LA from there, right?
right. So it was very interesting because we actually um we left Australia at I think like 9:30 in the morning,
Uh huh.
and it's a 12-hour flight. So that was a Tuesday morning, 9:30 in the morning, and we ended up landing in LA Tuesday morning at like 5 a.m.
Yeah, because they're a day ahead of us, right, on the international
Yeah.
date line, right?
Yeah, so that was really interesting, especially just like see in the air because it's you fly, um, you take off and it's light out, and then within a very short amount of time you see it get dark and then light again.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was cool.
Were you able to sleep on the plane back?
I didn't really sleep on that plane.
No.
No, but I made friends with my neighbor, my seat neighbor. It was a guy from West Virginia and his 11-year-old daughter. So the three of us were chatting the whole time and watched a movie together. And
How long
yeah,
is that flight?
12 hours.
Shoo. Wow.
Yeah.
Hope it was a long, exciting movie. Like The
Yeah.
Godfather 1, 2, and 3. I guess you could throw that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it ended up being fun. You meet new people and have a good experience.
The good thing
And then
about going from LA to New York, though, is you hit that jet stream and usually you shave off a half hour or so, right?
yeah, so we ended up landing in Newark early, but
Oh,
then
yeah.
we got stuck in airplane traffic on the runway.
Nice.
So we just had to like sit on the plane for an extra half an hour.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
lost your, okay. So you gained it and lost it.
Yeah.
The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. So how it, just to, before we wrap up, how was your, if you could generalize your experience?
I think it was very interesting. I'm glad I went, and I think I think it's important to see other cultures and see how other people live within the world, because it's just so different from the US. The US is very, a very privileged country, and growing up, growing up in the US and in New Jersey, New York, you kind of have access to everything you want. Even if you're not the most wealthy, you still have access to a lot. And it's very easy to in comparison, it's very easy to go and get a job and work towards what you want and go to school and things like that. There's a lot more opportunity in the US than there are in these other countries.
Yeah,
And so
there's
I
a
think
lot of things we take for granted here. There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
right. And I think, going to underprivileged communities and seeing a new culture and seeing how people live, and they're very content living this way. Um,
They all seem in the photos, they all seem very happy. They're always smiling.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone's happy, and even there, like, no one's homeless. No one doesn't have a home because you stay with your tribe. And so even though they're living in a grass hut, like, there is not a homeless community.
Right. Right.
So it's
Interesting. So it's a
definitely a
good
good experience.
experience. It's a good
Yeah.
experience. Where you going next?
I don't know. My friend Rebecca is moving to Indonesia, so I do hope to be able to go visit her there
Oh,
too.
she's leaving that mission?
Yeah, so her
Is the
next
whole mission
assignment.
leaving, or is she just?
No, so people kind of come and go. So you typically sign up for like a 2-year contract, and at the end of it you can, decide to stay or decide to go somewhere else.
Hmm. So
So
she's heading to Indonesia.
yeah, so
Yeah.
as much as she did really enjoy being there and will miss the community there, she's decided that the next step for her is Indonesia.
Hmm.
So she's going to be learning another language and a new culture, and so I'm hoping I'll get to go see her there too.
Oh, good. So you have to wait for her to settle in and get to know the locals before you can take the easy road into these villages.
Yes. I'll let her do the hard work, and I'll just come visit.
Well, thanks very much. I sort of kind of feel like I traveled a little bit during this conversation, so I appreciate that.
Anytime.
A little respite from the the daily grind is
Mhm.
always welcome. So thanks for sharing that, Sophie, and we'll have you back again and tell us all about Indonesia when you get there and back.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks again, Sophie. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay.